So one of the things that I really hate are PowerPoints because they usually just fall apart whenever I put together a really nice one. And then on the occasions when I put together a really bad one, the screen is extremely large and everyone can see it. So unfortunately, you're just going to have to take my word that this was really cool. Okay, so what I'm going to be talking about today is just the basics of learning. And I should say that this talk is motivated by two things. The first is that I think that the world has enough PowerPoint slides, so every talk should kind of justify itself, and therefore there should be something at stake in any sort of presentation that you're getting. The second thing is that the speaker, I think, should have a personal or emotional investment in what's going to happen. And so I think both of those conditions are fulfilled here because basically what's at stake today is your soul, your ability to make something meaningful out of the short time that you have in this moral realm. And the pet peeve that I have is why they can't let us use smartphones in parliamentary debate. Does anyone have a good reason for this? We live in a time when we have unfettered access to information. But in parliamentary debates, they give us 15 minutes to talk about the intricate politics of some distant foreign country. And they don't even allow us to do any preliminary research to get the basic facts. It seems like this is encouraging all the bad habits that Americans have. So why do we do this? Thoughts?
We don't people who don't just understand.
I mean, sometimes that happens. But if you have two, or better yet, 8 mutually ignorant people, as you might have in a bin room, all saying that this is one thing and this is another and this is another thing, and then doing mental math in the round and doing it wrong while they're at it, making up statistics on all these things, what do we get out of this? Why don't we let people do basic research?
Because they don't know what the topic is going to be, they're forced to learn about more things than they would if they knew the topic.
Okay. I think that gets close to the question that I'm going to be, or the answer to this that I'm going to try to give. One of the things that researchers have found is that, especially as our world puts more and more demands upon cognitive complexity, that academic success, which then translates into things like a higher income and into general quality of life, because you have access to more material things, that success can be boiled down to basically 3 components. So one is intelligence. Second is conscientiousness, and then the third is something that they call NFC. Now, as far as intelligence goes, if we're talking about fluid intelligence, a component of IQ, that's something that's largely a function of hereditary, early childhood environment, and the inability to have like a lance go through your frontal lobe or something like that, right? So, as far as that goes, that's not really something that I can help you with, right? That said, I don't really think it's anything that anyone here needs to worry about either, because if you're doing high school or college debate, you're already at the sort of minimal threshold to be able to, at least as far as intelligence is concerned. Conscientiousness is something that I could probably help you with, but I don't really have the time to do it, right? I'm not a drill sergeant. Conscientiousness is simply the amount of discipline, the amount of habits that you're willing to build up. So most people know that, yes, you have to be smart and you have to be hard working. Those two things seem to make sense. NFC is what is sometimes what is known as need for cognition in literature. It's your ability to make abstract mental models, and generate different abstract mental models of the world, and your interest in doing so. Now, that NFC is sort of the pretentious scientific name. The general one that most people are more familiar with is something that we call curiosity. So why is curiosity so important? Well, first of all, because the more that you're able to make cognitive models of the world, the more that you have some sort of mastery of the world, right? The calmer that you feel, because it's unlikely that things in your environment are going to surprise you. If you think about this, you can think about early humans, and you can also think about yourself in your early introduction to humanity. Right, so early humans had a lot of spare cognitive capacity when they were wandering around the savannah and didn't have to invest all of their brain power into merely surviving. Right? So they could do things like learn something new about the saber-toothed tiger or whatever. Saber-toothed tiger was one let's think about that. But in the movies, the two walk together. So, but they could learn more about their environment. One of the difficulties, though, is that you don't know what your environment is going to throw at you, right? So there is what Nassim Taleb refers to as an anti-fragile strategy, which is essentially to invest in a strategy that has low costs and a potentially high payoff in a rare event, right? So most of the time, when you're learning facts about the world, most of those facts are not going to really matter to your survival. But there might be a disaster scenario where you'll have to know something. And then it helps the more facts you have because you have a larger database from which to draw. The same thing you see with babies, right? When babies arrive in the world, they don't know what is significant. They have to learn that from their environment. You see a baby babbling, it's a baby attempting to communicate, and parents who respond to that baby babbling in a favorable way, that baby is likely to continue to invest in speaking, and as a result, to be better at communicating, better at acquiring verbal learning throughout life. Okay, but not all curiosity is created equal, right? There are three classes of curiosity. So the first is the one that you're probably the most familiar with. It's diversive curiosity. It's what happens when people go Googling, right? And there's a sort of, I think, a myth in education that if you just sort of let children freely wander about, right? Rousseau has done this before damage education. If you go around and just let children wander about, they'll, invest in the works of Plato, and they'll, be able to dive into the literature of Shakespeare, and all of this they'll just naturally acquire on their own because people are naturally good. Well, we have a good counterexample to that, right? We have the internet. And what do people mostly use the internet for? For the most part, they use it to waste their time, right? Our generation spends about 4 hours, I think, a day it is on the internet. A lot of it monitoring what people like about whatever inane thoughts are floating around on Facebook, right? The other difficult thing, though, about all of this information overload is that there's no structure to it. And after a while, it just becomes exhausting because you can't decide what's meaningful and what isn't. There's far more information out there than is going to be in your capacity to hold in your head. And if you don't have a structure to it, you're not going to be able to make much use of it. So the second class, and it's a class that we'll really be focusing on for the rest of this presentation, is what is called epistemic learning, or curiosity, which is that curiosity that drives you to build models of knowledge. It builds for you a structured, ordered representation of the universe so that you can look around and things actually begin to make sense to you. And this is necessary to develop the third, and what I think is the most important form of curiosity, which is empathic curiosity. In other words, our ability to make accurate models and representations about what other people are thinking and feeling. I can't help you with that either because I don't know anything about that. So we have three classes within epistemic curiosity, or three sort of, you can think of them as inverted parameters, right? These create the relationship between curiosity and three factors: confidence, knowledge, and surprise. So at the low level of confidence, if you don't know much about a subject, you have very little curiosity about it, right? So if you walked into a class on differential equations and you have no grounding in any of the previous mathematics that goes into it, after a while, your brain is just going to shut down, right? You're not going to want to fill in the gaps in your knowledge because you have no foundation, no basis from which to start. So if you don't have confidence, or if you don't have knowledge, or if it's something that doesn't really surprise you, in other words, if you're at the low end of any of these factors, then your curiosity is correspondingly low. It's the same thing if you're on the high end, right? If you know a lot about the subject, then your curiosity, or you think you know a lot about it, then your curiosity is going to be low. If your confidence in the subject is really, really high, then your curiosity is also going to be low. And if you're, if what you're seeing basically accords with everything else that you expect from your environment, then your curiosity is going to be low. So being at the middle spot of all of those things, being confident but not too confident, being knowledgeable but not too knowledgeable, being sufficiently surprised without being completely perplexed. All of those things, that's sort of the sweet spot for curiosity. So, if you can think of a working model of the brain, right? The part that is attuned to your external environment is your working memory. And it's taking in all sorts of things about this room, for instance, monitoring all sorts of things. And it doesn't know which things are important and which things aren't. What is going to determine whether or not something is important is when it gets stored into your long-term memory. So your long-term memory is basically the reservoir of all the random information that you've seen in the world that suddenly has become important. And there are two processes at work that help to support the long-term memory. One is the automatic processes, right? So basic habits that you have. And this is geared towards survival. Obviously, there are ways that people can mess with the circuitry, right? So if you snort coke up your nose, for example, your brain will get a message saying, wow, the reward system is kicking in. You must be doing something right. Do that again. Snort coke again, and soon enough you have an addiction. Those are the automatic processes. Those sort of work with your, the chemical balance of your body. Things like gastration, things like your feed or breathe systems. There are, however, the other elaborative processes, which is that when you take in random information and you're able to put it into a structure that has meaning, in other words, it relates to other things that are already within your brain, you return to it repeatedly, those elaborative processes help to build it into your long-term memory. Okay, so because the slide might be difficult for some people to see, for this next one, I'll just read it out. Okay, just memorize the following: 7, 4, 8, 3, 0, 5, 8, 2, 8, 9, 4, 0, 6, 2. Okay, who has it? Okay, that's fine. I don't either. And I just read it. Now, for those of you who can see it, try to memorize that. Everyone got it? Who can say it? Okay. That second slide had 24 letters in it, right? That first string of numbers that I read to you was just 14 digits. There was more information that was encoded in that second slide, and yet most people here were able to quickly absorb that second slide. Why was that? Well, a couple of things. First of all, most people here are used to assigning meaning to letters as opposed to numbers, right? So if you talk to like some weird person who, every number is their friend and they're all shaking hands in their mind, then when I read that list of numbers, they might be able to repeat it back quickly, right? So those people who memorize, 5 to 100 digits, for example. But when it comes to letters, we're used to already assigning to those individual components. But we're also used to doing something called chunking, right? Which is assigning very short amounts into your working memory and then attaching that to something else that's in your long-term memory so that the neural network can assign to that some sort of meaning. In other words, it's incorporating what you already have in your brain and taking as much as your working memory can hold. So how do you apply this to just general learning? Well, I think that there's a sort of, Dickens has a novel, Hard Times, where there's a character, Brad Wright, who's just facts, facts, facts. And this is sort of a character we're using a lot in education. But you need facts as a basis to having any sort of knowledge, right? You need to be able to navigate, for example, history, right? You shouldn't stop, hopefully, with the dates of when things happen. But it becomes very difficult to follow a narrative if you're not able to know which came first and what happened next. So that's often why when you're learning something, it can be very useful to start by building a list. And building a list basically has 3 stages to it. The first is to just build the spine of the list, right? So what are the borders of this list? If you're trying to memorize the presidents, for example, there are going to be 45 presidents, there's a first one, there's a current one, right? That's your spine. The second thing that you want to do is you want to chunk it into sections. Now, there's, I think, a dull way to chunk it, which is I'm going to do the first 5 presidents, and then I'm going to do the next 5 presidents, and then I'm just going to go through. Now, you can do that. But I think from what I've seen, it's usually a lot easier for people if they first see through. So, for example, memorize which presidents were assassinated in office, right? That's going to get you a sort of random distribution, and then you're going to want to memorize which presidents died in office but were not assassinated, right? So now you have a list of 4 and a list of 4. And then you have, 3 more presidents who were sort of involuntarily or disgraced. 2 of them were removed. But you have 3 presidents who were disgraced, 2 who were impeached, and 1 who resigned. And so working from that, now you have 11 presidents out of 45. So you have a fairly good distribution, and then you can begin to chunk it, right? So now you have a narrative. Who are the presidents between Washington and Lincoln? Who are the presidents between Lincoln and Garfield, and so forth and so on. Another way to keep something memorable is to define oppositions, right? Some oppositions just write themselves. First president, our current president. Whatever you think of them, they're certainly very different people. Okay, so that's one way that you can build a list. And once you have that basic working syllabus, then you can begin to network your brain and network it to things that are important. So how do you network your brain? Well, the first thing that you have to do is you have to stay foolish, right? You have to convince yourself that you don't know enough about a topic. And I think that, for example, if you really, really studied any sort of topic in depth, you would eventually find that it can connect to just about anything else, right? There's that Wikipedia clicking game where you just click it and eventually all leads to philosophy, right? And that's because the branches of knowledge are unified. And so the more that you learn even about a particular topic, the more that you'll find that you'll need to know about that topic. The second thing that you'll want to do is chunk upward and also chunk downward, right? So you want to chunk upward into themes and then chunk downward into details. A simple example of this might be, let's say that you started off studying about Islam, right? Chunking upward would mean a comparative study of religions generally, and chunking downward would mean, learning about the various branches of Islam, Sunni and Shia being the 2 most obvious. The third thing that you're going to want to do is you're going to want to build a strategy of both breadth and depth, what is sometimes called the foxhog strategy, right? So the fox knows many things, the hedgehog knows one thing well, right? So you build upon specialized knowledge where you're already pretty confident, but you can continue to learn about that subject and field. And then, at the same time, branch out into something that you don't know, right? So if you're very good at history, for example, learn something about chemistry. If you're very good at mathematics, learn something about philosophy. You should also ask the big why. It says that on the PowerPoint that you're an animal with a soul. This is true. And so one of the things that you'll find is that increasing your knowledge of anything will definitely, as it says in Ecclesiastes, increase your sorrow. That's true, because any sort of accurate representation of the world is going to be a pretty sad one, right? People aren't born to be happy, they're born to die. And because we're born to die, we have to discover our permanent and earnest duties. And the only way that you can do that is to find some sort of way to make use of the thing that distinguishes you from the animals, which is your soul and also your brain. Okay, so a starter list to work with. Things that I think in seeing novice debaters, probably the first things that you should work with. You should know all the countries of the world. Okay? There's a game on Sporkle where you can type in all the countries of the world. They also include Palestine, so you can learn more. You can learn the major rivers and mountains of the world, because that's also going to condition a lot of any sort of geography that you learn is conditioned at least by those two geographic facts. You should know the presidents of the United States, because that's a very simple way to organize the history of this country. It's not the only way, but it's a start. You should know the kings and queens of England, again, not because it's the only thing that you should know about England, but because it's a start, and because we inherit our language and our laws from that country, so you should know something about it. You should know the squares and primes, because that'll make doing arithmetic easier, and I won't have to wince when people try to tell me like what happens when you add GDP A to GDP B. Okay. Once you move beyond those sort of basic, simple facts, I think that there's also a simple reading list that most people, I think, could consider themselves decently accomplished if you manage at least this, right? You should know the Bible, not necessarily for any religious thing, although if that can be in addition to your life. But also because it's impossible to have much access to either the history or literature of this country. You won't be able to make much of Chaucer or Shakespeare or Milton if you don't have at least a working familiarity with the Bible. Shakespeare also, because he is the author of the English language, he's given us most of the phrases that people use, like household words. Euclid's Elements, most people take Euclidean geometry, but I think actually going through and rigorously following the proofs is a good use of your time. Not just because of the mental exercise that it provides, but also because many of the results in there, though they were known thousands of years ago, are not known today, despite the fact that people have access to Google. E.O. Wilson has a great book, The Diversity of Life. I think that makes an excellent introduction for biology. And Richard Feynman's lectures on physics, I think, are able to provide in a clear and nevertheless rigorous way an introduction to what is at least mostly settled in physics. Robert Rimini's Short History of the United States and Blaney's Short History of the World both provide in a narrative form something that can at least allow you to have the major events of world and American history at your fingertips. Then when you move on to other histories, as I think you should, you'll at least have that. To continue your curiosity, I think the New York Review of Books is probably the best single publication for debaters, but there are many other fine ones. Last thing that you need is some sort of teacher or guide, right? Someone who actually knows something and is able to encourage you on this journey. If you have someone like that, that's good. If you don't, there's plenty. So always.
to extend on one of the things that was mentioned, I think one of Daniel's frequent refrains, and I know UH people know it, know your geography, because you can't debate, particularly like the Middle East and Europe are two spots, particularly like when we're talking about European refugee crises, or we're talking about the situation in Syria, where if you know the geography of the region, you are a heck of a lot less likely to say dumb things than if you don't know the geography of the region and still think you can invade it. And it is very easy to tell when you walk into a round who can find Syria and its neighbors on a map and who is looking elsewhere. So, I mean, and that's just those situations, right? Knowing geography in advance. Because, like, take, for example, the humanitarian crisis that is the Venezuelan government. If that spills over, knowing who Venezuela borders would be nice. It's not something we think about right now, but it's something that if you know geography, you can know. And knowing each and every one of the countries is great. So when someone starts naming names of countries, like say, what was the African Union country that we were debating 2 years ago? Burundi, where a lot of people couldn't positively identify it as a country. It's kind of embarrassing when that happens. So knowing all the countries is a tangible value. I think that's the easiest way for a beginning debater to put themselves above the fray, particularly on international topics, which are some of the hardest topics to debate because they require intense knowledge. It's not that hard to train yourself by looking at maps, looking at playing the Sporkle game, which is something that Daniel has made us do before on countries. It's a great way to do it. So yeah, just fully endorse the learning of geography, because otherwise, if you don't, I then have to judge rounds where I'm just embarrassed to be one of
Any questions for Dan? Take a stretch. Just stretch your arms so that you don't get, you can stand, sit. Good. So as Daniel said, each talk has to justify itself, and this talk is moving from an understanding of how to learn to an understanding of how you should perhaps attempt to get better at debating if that's what you want to do. And maybe that's not what you want to do. Might not even be valuable. But I want to draw a picture. And the first picture is going to be the greatest misconception about pens.
Do pens work?
A lot of people assume that progress in an endeavor proceeds like this. Linear line. But if you've ever done anything, you should realize that this is not true. So let's say you lift weights. When you start lifting weights, you will rapidly increase the amount of weights that you can lift. So if you start doing a bench press or a squat, at first you'll be able to lift very little, and then you'll be able to lift a lot more. But then you'll hit a certain point, and your growth line will actually look a lot like this. You'll go up for a while and be very happy because every time you lift weights, you'll be able to lift more weights. And then all of a sudden, you'll hit this. And your growth will either stop or it'll slow down to a point where it becomes almost imperceptible. And this is the point where people quit almost every activity that they try to do. And this could be anything. And the reason that people quit is because you are motivated by progress toward goals. So your affect, the reason you feel good, is because you feel yourself moving towards something. Now, most of the time you don't notice this, but as you approach lunch, for instance, you will feel good because you are approaching this goal that you have, which is to eat lunch, whether that's something you brought or pizza. Now, recognizing that this is true, that both things are true, one, that you are happy based on whether or not you're moving toward a goal, and two, that progress in an activity is not linear, you can go a number of ways. The first way is to kill yourself, because if you put these two insights together, will realize that true happiness is probably going to be elusive. It'll last for about this long, and then will disappear into the ether. Or another way to approach this is to find a different way to make progress. So a lot of people think when they do debate that they're going to do this. And until they reach this point, that's completely true. So when you start doing debate, initially you'll struggle to talk for 7 minutes in front of an audience, and then rapidly you'll be able, like Anna did. Over a period of 2 months, Anna went from being able to talk for 1.5 minutes in front of an audience to being able to talk for a full 7 minutes. Now that's incredibly rapid progress. Like that's just straight up, right? And then at that point when she can fill the 7-minute speech, it's like, well, where do you go from there? The progress becomes a lot harder to attain. So what you have to do is to break tasks apart into simple and achievable goals that will make you feel good while you make progress in this plateau period. If you don't do this, you will get sad and you will quit. So let's talk about the things in debate that you might break apart into ways to move or get better. The first thing is your knowledge, which is related to, more than anything, the motions or the topics. The second thing is the way you prepare, which is related to organization. I'm talking specifically about prep time there. The third thing are the positions. This is opening government, opening op, closing government, closing op. The fourth thing are the roles. So PM, etc. The fifth thing is speaking. I'm going to divide this into 3 areas. And the sixth thing is POIs. I'm not going to be able in this talk to tell you how to get better at all of these things, but I want, if I can, to draw a line for each of them, so that in each of these areas you can see yourself as making progress toward a goal. Because you can recognize that someone is better than you, but without knowing why they're better than you, you cannot move toward them probably, except by guessing how did they get to where they got. And so I'm going to describe mostly how I got to where I got, and this relates to what Daniel was talking about, conscientiousness being a predictor of performance. If you take a Big 5 personality inventory, you can find out how conscientious or not you are. Now, if you are like me, you are in like the 96th percentile for conscientiousness, which means you organize things and you break things apart into little pieces and you advance systematically through any endeavor. If you are in the 4th percentile of conscientiousness, you are exactly the opposite. You don't know how to order tasks, you're kind of disorganized and in slight disarray. This doesn't mean that you automatically will fail in life, but it makes it a lot harder because you're not going to have this like drive pushing you from inside to do these things. You'll have to structure your life in the way that a conscientious person would. So how would a conscientious person structure debate? As Daniel said, you have to know things, and I think there are 3 ways that you can describe your knowing. So there's sorry, I'll pick on Drake now. Drake,
Yes.
what is happening in North Korea?
They are
Building.
Belsinus. Nuclear weapons.
All right, that is a
Okay.
superficial understanding of what is happening in North Korea, but it is an understanding of what is happening in North Korea. There's an entire possibility that when I ask Drake what is happening in North Korea, he goes, what is North Korea? So your first goal should be to achieve a superficial understanding of issues in the world. And for North Korea, a great superficial understanding is they're trying to build nukes. Then you might add on, how does the US feel about this? Not good, right? So, superficial understandings. Your goal there is to move from a superficial to a deep understanding of an issue, right? So you can know that North Korea is trying to build nukes. A deep understanding would talk about delivery mechanisms, would talk about the time that it would take them to actively build a weapon, the range of the weapons, that sort of thing. That's how you go from superficial to deep. You can ask me more about that afterwards. The second way I think you can think of information and knowledge is to determine whether it is contemporary or historical. So, BJ, what is happening in Britain? Brexit, good. Why is Britain leaving the European Union? All right, so we've got some historical, the historical depth is perhaps not there, right? I'm sorry to pick on you, but we have to know where we're going, right? So we have a contemporary understanding. Britain is leaving the EU. We can deepen our understanding to know why, but we can also deepen it in a different way, which is historically. So you can understand what is Britain's historical relation with the EU in order to understand what it's doing now. It may seem that they're similar, but they're slightly different. Because you can have a deep understanding of what is happening in North Korea today without necessarily understanding the historical dimensions, right? So if I tell you the capabilities of North Korea's military program, that doesn't tell you about North Korea's history and the history of South Korea, right? They're two slightly separate axes. Yes?
I think the even better example of this is the Israel-Palestine situation. You can know all you want about settlements in Gaza and what the current conflict is, but without understanding the history of the relationship between those two state and non-state actors, you're not going to be able to fully understand the situation.
Perfect example. The last one is isolated versus networked knowledge. So it is possible to know about North Korea and to know just about North Korea. But as you start to know more about North Korea, you can identify the kind of category of issue it is, which is probably rogue states. You can think about issues in which it is related to other contexts, like nuclear proliferation, and then connect knowledge across domains. There are economic issues at stake with like the inter-trade area of South and North Korea, right? There are all sorts of things that network your knowledge. So your goal in terms of knowledge, as far as I can tell, is to move along these three axes. So you want to move from superficial to deep knowledge by going from North Korea's building nukes to what kind of nukes, what are they going to be used for, why are they building nukes, that sort of thing. You can go from contemporary knowledge of what is happening now to what has happened in the past, perhaps how does that affect what is happening now. And you can move from what is happening in this place versus how does this place relate to other places like it, how does this place relate to the places surrounding it, and move from isolated to network knowledge. Now, as you do all the things that Daniel identified in terms of learning, I think you should try to move along these axes with your knowledge of issues, especially the issues that are going to come up in debate. If you do this, you will actually be able to know you'll be able to feel your progress in this, right? Because Drake, if a month from now I ask you, what is happening in North Korea, you'll be able to say more than that they're building nukes, right? And the knowledge increases, but it only increases if you know where you're going. You're going from superficial to deep, from contemporary to historical, from isolated to network knowledge. Second, preparing and organizing. I'm not going to say too much on this, but once you have all this knowledge about the world that you've gained from study, you're going to have to, in 15 minutes, translate that into something you can use in a debate round. Now, a lot of people think about preparation as being 15 minutes long, but in truth, preparation starts now and ends when the round starts, which means you are able to organize your knowledge in advance of debates, not only in terms of creating briefs, but also in terms of thinking about the knowledge you're gaining in a way that applies to debates. So one thing that's been helpful for me is I read a lot, and I'll read Foreign Affairs, say. Foreign Affairs gives you a 10-page article maybe about a certain issue, and it's usually in an argumentative form. So somebody's saying, this is how I feel about this issue. In that situation, as I read the article, I'm not just reading to understand what the person is saying, but I'm thinking, when could this come up in a debate, and how might I apply this in a debate? which, if you think about it, is not just learning, but is actively preparing for debate and organizing your knowledge in advance of a debate. Because you're thinking, what are possible ways that a debate could be structured in which this knowledge might be applicable, and how then might I actually organize and retain this knowledge so that it is useful in that case, right? So, for instance, a lot of these authors will organize their thing in terms of a bunch of different arguments. So, 3 reasons you should do something. I could, if I wanted to, clip out every article I read and put it in a gigantic binder full of stuff, which would be inefficient. Or I could write down on a sheet of paper the 3 reasons that the person thinks X should be done. Now, the recall is not going to be perfect, but if I'm in a debate round about North Korea, and I've read an article about what X general thinks we should do about North Korea, and the topic is slightly related to the article, and I pull out the 3-line summary of what the author had to say, the recall is going to be there. So I can organize that in advance. Now, in preparation time, you should be thinking, how can we very rapidly condense the information we have into usable form? This I cannot really help you with because it's going to depend on how your brain works and how your partner's brain works, and that's going to vary. But you and your partner, especially if you have a long-term partnership with someone, should figure this out. This is something that you can be shitty at or very good at, and you can know when you're shitty at it and when you're good at it. You're bad at it when after 15 minutes you're like, oh god, like we're dead. You're good at it. You're good at it when after 7 minutes you're no longer talking to each other because you're each writing your speeches and you know what you're going to do and you're not worried about it. So your goal should be every single time we prepare, by the end of prep, I feel good about doing this debate and not that. Third, the positions. This, there are lots of resources for you to look at on this, but you should know what each position is responsible for doing and relatively how to do it. You should also have some form of exemplars of teams you think have done this quite well. So for me, in terms of opening government, I look at the team from Harvard in Chennai World's Finals. They were basically asked to reform the Indian government. And Josh Zoffer stands up as prime minister and gives this very consultant-laden language. He just like sounds like an Economist article, and he's like, well, you have to remove all of these employment restrictions to stop people from moving in all these jobs, right? And he's like, he lays out everything in detail, like what their case is. And you think, well, that's a pretty good prime minister speech, except it sounded kind of hollow, like it was very dispassionate, it was very just analytical and logical, which is fine. And then Ben Sprung-Kaiser stands up and basically says, here is the impact on humans, right? It means electricity for people. It means that moms get to take care of their parents. And you realize, okay, they very deliberately divided what they were going to do in these speeches. So you have to think about positions like that in terms of thinking, rather than the second speech following the first, which is certainly one way to structure your speeches. First person talks, second person like tries to salvage what has happened. You should eventually get to a point where you are complementing each other so that the sum is greater than the parts, right? So that Josh Zoffer gives an analytical framework to think about the issue, and then Ben Sprung-Kaiser brings the emotional force of it to bear on the audience in the deputy speech. That's the kind of way that you want to start thinking about positions. Similarly for roles, except each role does have specific actionable items that it needs to do. For instance, you want to know about 3 types of speeches: leaders, members, and whips. Those are the general, 4 types, deputies. Leaders, deputies, members, and whips. 4 general types of speeches, and what are the responsibilities of each of those speeches, and am I fulfilling those responsibilities? And an easy way to know whether or not you're fulfilling these responsibilities is to record yourself and watch the video of you and say, did I do the things that I'm supposed to do in the speech? If the answer is yes, you're moving towards your goal. If the answer is no, you need to do whatever the thing is that you did. Fifth, speaking. I think there are 3 things that you Obviously, there is the physical act of speaking, and that should be something that you work to improve. So that means eliminating filler words from your speech. It means projecting in a way that people can understand you. It means perhaps using dynamic volume, inflection, that sort of thing to excite people's emotions. All of that physical stuff is fine. But I think there are three things that each speech has to have in it that are sort of abstract from any sort of other consideration. These mostly apply to non-leader speeches, but also to leaders as well. So you have to have substantive material, you have to have responsive material, and you must have meta material. The first is, I think, easy to understand. That's when you're bringing an argument of your own teams into the debate. The second is obvious as well. That's when you're responding to other teams in the debate. But the third is something that I think novice debaters underappreciate. But as you rapidly figure out how to say your arguments and respond to the arguments of the other person, you will need an extra something, because that's, once you get to that point, what else do you do except meta stuff? So this is where it's useful to think about how debates are judged. And they're judged by three people who have watched the debate and maybe don't want to watch the debate, sitting in a room after the debate and having a debate about the debate that was had. Which means you have to win two debates. You only have to win one debate to win the debate, but it's actually not the debate that you're in. Your goal is actually to win the debate that the judges have after the debate. Now, if it is the case that you are in a room with one judge, this is less important because you are at their whim. But if there is more than one person, you must win the debate after the debate. And without getting too much into it, meta stuff is that. It is giving your judges reasons why you have won the debate after the debate, if that makes sense. That could be its own lecture in itself. But it's worthwhile just to have it on your radar, that it is not enough to merely make good arguments and to respond to the good arguments that your opponents have made and make them look silly. If you do those two things, you will be a good debater, and I will beat you. And I will beat you because I am not trying to make arguments and respond to your arguments. I am trying to get the judge to give me the win. And I do that by making meta arguments, by pushing you out of the round, that sort of thing. Trickery. Lastly, points of information. So, in British parliamentary, as opposed to a lot of other formats of debate, there is limited impromptu cross-examination that just happens at the whim of the speakers. So you stand and offer a point and they accept you, maybe. Now, I'm sure we've all, if we've done BP, asked bad questions. And this happens when you stand up and the person calls on you and you realize, I don't have a question. You stumble and you fumble and you say something stupid. Maybe even actively hurting your side, but definitely making you look like a buffoon and making you embarrassed to ever stand up again. Obviously, we want to move away from that. So you should start to think about, how can I make my questions better? And a good way to do that is actually just to write your question down and ask that question during the round. This is more useful if you've already done your speech and you're only worried about asking questions, obviously. But you want to be able to look at your question and think, is this the best question that I could ask? And if it's not, how can I change it or ask a different question to make it more efficient? Now, when we think about progress in terms of asking questions, a decent question, you ask the question and the opponent answers it and it maybe makes them look silly. A devastating question, you ask the question and the speaker stops speaking for maybe 30 seconds. And this happens because I've done it, and you can do it too, but you will never do it, or you will only do it by accident if you simply ask whatever comes into your mind when you stand up. A really good, insightful, destructive question is meta and it is calculated and written out and designed to just punch somebody in the face. Okay, so what does this mean? You cannot do all of these things at once. It's just going to be very difficult and impossible. So I don't want you to think, here's what Sterling said to improve upon, because that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is you need, if you want to feel good about debate at the point where you hit this plateau, to find something, and it only has to be one thing that you can feel yourself making incremental progress on. Because if you don't find that one thing, you'll just be miserable while you struggle through the plateau phase. And a lot of people, a lot of good debaters actually quit at that phase and never realize their potential. So if you want to realize your potential, find something, and it could be as simple as, I'm going to make sure that my preparation organization is perfect. And every debate speech I do, every 15-minute prep, I'm working to do better, and afterwards I'm thinking, well, how did that not go well? How could I make it better, etc. Or maybe it's thinking, I'm going to work on my POIs for the next month, you know, and never ask a bad question that I haven't written down and thought about again. Those sorts of things. Now, obviously, don't work on POIs for a whole year, you know, do other things as well. But pick something that you can feel progress on. And the good news is, a lot of this stuff, at a certain point, is going to, hopefully, you'll just sort of reach a point where you kind of plateau with this stuff, and it's actually hard to get better. Once you're writing POIs that stop people from talking, there's no like super POI that gets better than that. You know, like I don't think there's a POI that like actually ends the debate, and with, like the judges are like, well, stop everything, you won the debate. You know, there's a limit, right? But when you get to this, you can always keep going, right? So there are myriad social issues and political issues and other issues in the world that you can either have no understanding of or a superficial understanding, and you can go deeper into that, right? You can have historical understandings of the issues you already know. You can network your knowledge so that you understand, like, ethnic conflicts. Where do they happen? What are the usual dynamics that occur there? You know, like that sort of thing. Okay. I think that's everything that I wanted to cover. But in summation, progress is not linear. If you believe that it is, you will become very distressed because your happiness is dependent on feeling like you are making progress. So what you should do if you want to be happy is to find a way that you can make progress linear again. And usually that happens by breaking apart something into its component parts and picking one component part to get better at until such a point as progress becomes less linear, and then you pick another one. And obviously, if you do all of these, you'll eventually cap out on all of them. But at that point, you will be one of the best debaters in the world, and, you know, hopefully winning it. Okay, any questions? All right. Oh, sorry.
As is so often my job after these two gentlemen give you wonderful esoteric principles, I'm here to turn into something a little more tangible. The purpose of this lecture is very simple. How to structure your ideas, be they good, bad, or less than bad, into something that is not offensive to people. Now, this is harder than it sounds because our current president has really shown us many ways you can take your less than good ideas and offend people with them today. So, I understand it's more relevant than ever. He is, you know, the one thing I will say about the president, he is better at staying on message than anyone I've ever seen. Now, as long as it's his message. Like, he is not going to water down his message no matter what it is. Like, he recently tweeted about the two greatest threats to our time. That would be called Crazy Joe Scarborough and Dumb Rock, David Wyshynski. So, literally in the tweet. So, I understand that we all have different things to say. Some of them may be more inflammatory than others. We need to find a way to structure them in a way that will be pleasing to the judges, understandable to our teammates, and will be reproducible even if we want to say them again. So, in the context of debate, how you structure your ideas is very important. And I've given a lot of talks about structure at various times. That's sort of my watchword. But what I want to do today is I want to get down in the structure of speech and explain some of the tactics behind where you put your arguments and what you need to do at different points in the speech. So I'm going to break down the speech into three components. First, I'm going to talk about your initial impression, so your first impression. The three moments I care the most about in the speech are your first impression, your best argument, and your summary. Because I think no matter what speech you're giving in the context of the debate, for those of you who are newish to British Parliament debate, we're going to be doing spread rounds later. You'll get to see the different roles. Know that each role in the debate round has a different responsibility, a different thing that they're trying to do. So when I say this, the reason why I'm using these terms is because no matter what the role is of your speech, no matter what the assignment is, no matter what the content is, these are still the three things that it's very important to do and to do well. First impression is important for a number of reasons. We talk in the communication system about the primacy and recency effect, which is one of the reasons why we have the summary important as well. The things that people are most likely to remember are the first thing you say and the last thing you say, which is why we want to do that. In debate, it's very important. In British Parliament, unlike any other format, we have 4 teams all competing for points, which means first impressions are even more important, because what's the biggest risk in British Parliament? Not that you're actively stupid, but that you'll be actively forgotten. Because a team that is forgotten has no chance of winning. A team that is offensive but memorable might worm their way into winning points. How do we know this? Well, for those of you who know my team, Michael Mossman has proven it many times. Sometimes being memorable and offensive is good enough to win. So there are a number of risks when you're making a first impression. I think the biggest risk is making an underwhelming first impression, something that does not brand who you are as a team, does not establish what you are trying to say. Simply getting up and giving a generic milquetoast summary is probably the worst thing you can do. Be like, today, we stand for freedom. Therefore, we're in favor of the motion, and we will now move on to talk about the mechanics of how freedom can be applied to freedom. You know, whatever, dude. If you're for freedom, I'm for freedom, we're all for freedom. Who cares? Being ignored is something that is definitely problematic. The other thing that you're going to watch out for is you want to avoid offending. Now, there are many different ways you can do this. We have a debater on our team by the wonderful name of Matt Marai, who we all sort of hold our fingers together for the first 15 seconds of his speech, because it's either going to be poignant or he's going to offend everybody in the room.
The first 15 seconds?
It's the first 15 seconds where it's the worst.
Where's the laugh?
Or the last, right? He's really good in those first and last impressions. I remember there was one speech where he opened with, the thing about the black, and you're like, stop. Like, there is no way you can end that sentence, unless maybe we're talking about anarchists and you're going to say the thing about black bloc, but you said I don't think that's the case. Not going any further. So you do need to be aware that sometimes, because I'm going to tell you a little bit to make bold statements. When I'm saying make bold statements, I don't mean make statements that are going to show how offensive you can be. So this is what I call, don't do the Donald Trump thing. There are many arguments with which I agree with Donald Trump on. I am not generally agreeing with his initial framing of arguments. And the reason for it is very different. Donald Trump is engaging generally in a one-on-one debate. He picks a single villain and wants to match up against them. In a debate context, your first impression is you against 3 villains. And I think being the single lightning rod in the room that's willing to be offensive is a strategy that I wouldn't take in your first impression. So, what is a good first impression? What do you need to do? Let me tell you some things about a good first impression. 1, memorable. The most important thing. In order to be memorable, 1, you need to be mechanically strong. By that I mean do not have filler words. Be confident. One of the things that my debaters coming from the homeschooling world have a problem with is they want to come off as being polite. They want to wait to make sure that everybody is ready. Not anymore, Jordan. I know you're looking at me like, we don't do that. We're probably these polite debaters on the circuit. We get that. But when we were initially making the transition to move outside of our little bubble of debating, the problem was we wanted to shake every judge's hand. We wanted to make sure everybody was comfortable before we started. The problem is, from the second you step up out of your chair, your first impression has begun. Right? It's one of the reasons why how confident you look, how you're dressed, how quickly you move to the podium are all things that come into play when you're making a first impression. So when you're making a first impression that's memorable, you need to do so strongly. You don't want to have a low volume start. You don't want to be stumbling over yourself. You want to know where you're going. I'm a firm believer in limited preparation speaking. That's what my training is. So a lot of times I have approximately 35 words on paper that's supposed to get me through 7 minutes. But let me tell you what half of those words are going to be. It's going to be my first sentence. Because my first sentence, every time I get up, is scripted. Because it's just too important to leave it to chance. You want to make a good first impression? Make sure, 1, you write it down, and 2, make sure you practice it out loud. I always make sure before I get up and speak that I have practiced my opening statement multiple times. It feels comfortable, and I can get it in. You can be forgiven for having a bad second sentence, but you're not going to be forgiven for having a good first sentence. Okay, so that's just mechanically true. Other things about your opening impression. You need to set people's mind what you are talking about. What is your philosophy? What is your theme? What is your purpose? Okay, so let's say we're talking about North Korea, right? So if I'm on government and I'm saying the U.S. needs to be intervening in North Korea because of their nuclear weapons, I need to make it very clear what is the primary justification for why we need to intervene in North Korea. So, here's those from the group chat. Probably the easiest way to do this would be to say, look, if the United States doesn't intervene in North Korea, people will die. Because I am establishing an impact very quickly, and I am tying us to that. We are the team against people death. People death is generally reviled by other people. We are against it. Ha ha, right? If nobody remembers anything else about me, those guys are opposed to people dying. The other thing about a first impression is you want to not promise more than you can deliver, right? A lot of people come up with really eloquent statements that their speeches are not ready to back up, right? So someone would say, North Korea is committing grievous human rights violations that the international community must speak out against, and then never talks about the specifics of human rights violations. That's awkward. Whatever you're going to say in your statement needs to be an accurate representation of where you're going, rather than just a presupposition or something that is sort of foundation, right? If I don't really want to talk about human rights violations, I just really want to talk about nuclear weapons, don't talk about human rights violations in your opening statement. Make sure that you're actually going to follow up with what you say. So, in terms of structure, when you're making your first impression, 1, make sure it's scripted, and 2, make sure that it's an accurate representation of what your team is about to say. Now, if you're not feeling confident, this is not where you get up and say, we have some reasons, varied in nature, not very deep, but we believe it, right? Like, you don't have to be honest about your shortcomings. Whatever you are, collapse to your argument and make sure you make it well. Look, if you don't know anything else about North Korea, if you're just at the Drake level of understanding, I shall call it, you just be like, nuclear weapons are really bad. They're nuclear. Nuclear. No, I mean, you could say something about, like, there are 3 types of weapons of mass destruction that we generally believe countries are not allowed to have: nuclear, chemical, and biological. They are pursuing one of them, and therefore we must oppose them. I don't need to know anything about North Korea other than they have nuclear weapons that generally WMDs are frowned upon, and that's a pretty compelling statement, even with the surface level knowledge of North Korea. And it doesn't promise more than I can deliver. Even if I don't know anything about the human rights violations, which, by the way, you should read about, because if you're morbid like me, they're kind of funny. So you should read about North Korea, but if you don't, you can still make a statement that is compelling from the beginning without promising what you can deliver. Now, you're going to have more than one argument or debate round, I hope, in a debate speech. Many of you, I understand it's a stretch, but we'll get there. We'll get you all the way up to 2. But what I find most compelling in a debate round, when I'm judging these days, I'm not really judging the same way I used to. I used to make an elaborate grid, award people check marks on how many good arguments they say. I'd say to myself, I used to say this very tritely, you know, I like the team in the round that covers all the major issues. I don't care about that anymore. I care about the single best thing you say and say, is it intelligent? Is it correct? Is it on point? And if it is, I'm a lot more likely to award you 1 or 2 in the round if your compelling major narrative is interesting, on point, and delivered well. Okay. Now, you got to do a lot of other things in speech. Like this is just talking about sort of the cheap ways I use to boost up the samples. But what I would say is this, particularly as an intermediate debater, when you have maybe 3 arguments, but there's only one you're really comfortable with, you have to say to yourself, okay, where should I put my best argument? I am a firm believer that no matter what speech you're on, your best argument needs to come first. Because you want to build yourself some momentum. And there's a couple reasons for this. One, again on primacy and recency, if you bury it in the middle, like if it's your second argument, people are less likely to remember it statistically, so generally you wouldn't want to put your best argument in the middle. Second, best argument at the end is a little bit awkward. There's a couple reasons for it in our format. If the best thing you say comes right at the end, right at the beginning of protected time, it looks like you're unwilling to take comments from your opposition. So if you put your best speech, the best point of your speech last, it kind of looks like you're hiding from POIs because it will probably come, at least partially, during the time where they can't ask questions. So that's problematic. Whereas, like, because you're making an opening impression, giving a preview, yada, 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 you're not doing that at the beginning. There will be a time for you to take questions. Other things about your best argument, this is where I want to take my point. If I'm going to take one POI, maybe I'm taking 2, but if I'm going to take one, I want to take it directly after I've made my strongest argument. Because this gives me an opportunity, either 1, to fend off their best criticism of my argument, or 2, to really reinforce some of the points that I've already made. My favorite kind of question is when they're not listening to what I've said. It's when, so, let's say I have a 2.5-minute argument, right? They come up with their question in the first 15 seconds of me talking, and they spend their whole time trying to get the question, failing to realize that I've dealt with their criticism while they were busy trying to get me to ask a question. And right as I finish the point, they ask me the question, then I'd be like, thanks for listening. Allow me to repeat, and they're like, oh. You can do this if you know when you want to take the question strategically. Now, one of the things I've noticed that as UH students, you guys are getting better at is not taking the question in the middle of the point, taking it when you want to. But it's not just mechanically, oh, I shouldn't take it in the middle of the point, oh, I shouldn't take it in the middle of the sentence, oh, I shouldn't take it, but I don't know what you need to say. You should say to yourself, my best point is here. I want to take it directly following my best point. I mean, we've even gotten to the point, a la Sterling, where you don't even wait for them to stand up. You're like, I'll take the question now. You can do this if you know exactly when we want it. Take the question, and you can do that when you know where your strongest point is. Now, what is your strongest point? I think this may be a problem. Okay, so 1, your strongest point should be the one that you have the most detail about in general, right? So maybe, again, I'm Drake on North Korea. I know that they've done some things on human rights. I know that Kim Jong-un, or whatever his name is a bad dude and generally disliked by people. Maybe he's got some trust issues. But like, I've heard something about nuclear weapons. I think it was called the Taipodon, which is a funny name. And you know, I could talk about some nuclear weapons usage. Like, I learned about the bomb in Japan, and that was bad. I can make a parallel, right? This is the beginnings of a point that can sound credible by using enough of the surface level information I have in one point. I can start talking about why nuclear weapons are bad. I can give examples of when nuclear type weapons have been used. I can put in some names of nuclear weapons to make it sound like I know more than I do. And I know this is going to sound a lot more credible than when I vaguely talk about why Kim Jong-un is bad. This is a good sign that it's a good point. Another thing, you want to make sure that it fits the spirit of the resolution rather than being tangential to the resolution. A lot of times when you have highly specific knowledge, like I'm guilty of having, sometimes the thing you know the most about is barely related to the topic. I lost a round to John Cham, the only time in my life I've done that. I'm proud of you. Because we were debating whether or not college sports should continue to be allowed. Right? It was at Penpack, should college sports continue to be allowed? And I really wanted to bash the NCAA. Because I know a lot. about how to bash the NCAA and the problem with non-professional athletes. The reason why John won, even though John knows jack diddly about the NCAA or college sports in general, is because really the governing body of a lot, but not anywhere at all, of the college sports in America, one country, is only tangential to the question of whether or not intercollegiate athletics should exist. Just because the NCAA mismanages something does not mean it's a fundamental reason why college sports are bad. Because all my opponents had to do, which John did, is imagine, okay, what if the NCAA wasn't the governing body? What if I could provide an example in the United States of where the NCAA doesn't govern? What if, and Bozo would use like the Quidditch League, and I didn't have a response. I should have had a response. It is technically an athletic event, and it's not NCAA sanctioned, and I lost because of that. Because I didn't recognize what was my best point. Okay. I had some good points. I was talking, if I'm not mistaken, I was talking about injury risk, brain trauma, things along those lines, taking, the trade-off between classrooms and lowering admission standards to get athletes in for prestige, even in like, we've seen this in like British track and field. It's not just an American thing where they lower admission standards to let athletes in. But I didn't focus on those. I put my energy in the wrong ones because I couldn't identify what my best point is. So be real with yourself. Talk to your partner. Just because you're excited about a point doesn't mean it's the best point. And under this model, you got to figure out what your best argument is because everything builds around it. And so having an honest understanding of what your best argument is important. Because the other thing I do, I don't allocate my time equally. I spend a little bit more time on my best argument than I do on some of my other arguments because I have more to say and I know it's going to score points. So if you don't identify what your best argument is, you're not going to allocate your time correctly. So be honest with yourself. Where do I have the most detail? Is it on topic? Can it be compelling? Okay. The last check I have on this is, can I deliver this point in a way that actually supports the side that I'm on? Right? Sometimes you know a lot about a topic, but you know a lot on both sides. And you may have a hard time selling one particular issue, right? Like, I have a lot of things to say about Trump impeachment. I think Trump is doing an absolutely terrible job, and I can understand a lot of reasons why people would want him to be removed. Unfortunately, I am Democrat. I am fundamentally incapable of understanding, given my knowledge of how impeachment works, how impeachment would work. Like, there is no case whatsoever for an actual impeachment. There's perhaps a philosophical argument for removal, but there's not an argument through the nature of impeachment and the standard you have to meet to it. So if I was on the side of pro-impeachment, I might gravitate towards some of the arguments that I like, failing to recognize that because my personal bias is going to slip in, I will make some comment that'll be like, yeah, but you can't actually do it, and even if you did, it'd be worse for his detractors, and now I've shot myself in the foot. So whatever you do, make sure that you're going to be able to sell whatever your best argument is, rather than slipping in factually true things that undercut your point. That is factually true. If any of you think Donald Trump's going to be impeached. All right, summary is the third part. A summary is very important in a debate round because we are talking at a high level about very complex concepts. Some of the rounds that Sterling's talking about in the world's final rounds can get into 7 or 8 substantive arguments in one speech with details, with sub-points. I mean, they'll get to the point where they're citing examples, in-depth examples so briefly that they're just like putting a sentence in call, and that's an in-depth discussion of wars in Bosnia. I don't know how they do it, but they do it. That's a lot of information that you're trying to keep together. And even for my students, as you know, I try to have very diverse points in a speech. Like, I don't believe that you should have a speech that just talks on one level. Like, if you have practical arguments, you should also have moral arguments, which can be very confusing to a judge. And recognize that in this format, you will see a wide variety of judges. Many of them are former debaters themselves and are likely to follow. Some are debate coaches. Some are community members that are like, I have a pen. I like things. And with all of these people, it's important to give them some sort of hint to put things down on paper. Because the dirty little secret is, as great as your argument is, if it doesn't get on paper, on the judge's paper, when the judges excuse you from the room and have their discussion about who's winning, you're probably not going to win if your arguments are not down on paper. Now, there is a possibility that you were like by far the only competent person in the room, and I don't need to write anything down on paper other than like they win. But still, in a close round, if you want to win, you've got to make sure that your arguments get down on paper. How do you do that? You do this by, one, having a clear structure, giving nice, neat taglines of your points, but two, at the end of the speech, giving a proper and impactful summary of what you said. Right? Now, this is not the same as a structural review, right? So take, for instance, a Prime Minister's speech. In the Prime Minister's speech, I have to give some definitions, lay out a model, then give my justifications, right? So if I was giving a traditional public speaking review, I would mention the fact that I laid out a model. I'd say, okay, first we established some definitions, laid out a model, I might even give a brief review of the model, and then I give some justifications. That's not what you do here, right? You are not recapping what you did in the speech. You are giving an argumentative review. Judge, the main reason why we need to intervene in North Korea is because the threat of death is imminent, which is not true, but sure. On top of that, we're covered two other reasons. They are blank and blank. This is again where you can set the argument hierarchy, right? If you're using the best argument approach, this is another chance to remind your judges, this is what I am most confident in. This is the major reason. And then you say we did this and that. So another thing you would not do in a review is you would not review your rebuttal, right? Okay, fine. You made your rebuttal. That's not the problem. You want to talk about your positive matter and you want to frame it in a way that judges are going to remember it. If you want good speaker points, you need an hour after the round the judge to be able to say, what did Cody say? X, Y, and Z. Without prompting. If you can't do that, you're probably not going to get good, even if it was pleasing to the ear. What are the ways you do this? You have a quick preview, you have a quick review, and in that review, you have an argumentative summary. The best reason to vote for us is this. Other reasons include these. Please remember what I'm saying. Okay? And if you don't, I find like in time allocation, a lot of debaters, I think they have so many arguments to get to, they think they can skip the summary. Skipping the summary is totally unacceptable in British Parliament because in theory you can do it in 15 seconds. So at the point at which they tell you you have no time left, you have 15 seconds to wrap it up, is pretty much the time if everything else fails you need to give a quick summary. And again, using this model, it's pretty clear. If you can't give a full summary, at the very minimum you should say, the main reason why you need to vote for us is X. You can do that. Everybody can do a summary. There's no excuse for forgetting to do an argumentative summary. At the same time, it's also a very good way to end. If you're struggling to fill your 7 minutes, and you're done at like 3:05, rather than ending it with the awkward, I have nothing to say, thank you, you can end with an argumentative summary and boldly sit down at 3 minutes and 15 seconds. That looks a lot better. I respect that a lot more than the person that's just like, please something come to me. Did I write anything else in this paper? No, I drew some chickens. Yeah, okay, it's not coming, but I've got, what, 4 minutes left? Ooh, boy. Have a summary. It's a good way to end. It also will prevent my debaters from being killed by trying to end with the word thank you, and then I jump out of the corner with a knife. So, that'll be good. Having a summary and ending is there. So, the purpose of this lecture again today was just to give you some structural elements to help you in organizing any speech. If you remember nothing else, prioritize your arguments. Have your best argument and structure your speech around it. But I give you two other hints. Specifically, first impressions are of critical importance, and having an argumentative summary at the end is a great way to end the speech.
Okay, questions for Cody? All right, that concludes the lecture part. We're going to have a 10-minute bio break so you can pee and stretch. There is going to be a sign up here if you want to go in for pizza. You can put your name and your topping preference with the caveat that you probably won't get it. But, you know, whatever you want, just write it down.
Are we going to have time to run down?
We'll order, I think.
Yeah, we can order up. Would you prefer to run down? Is that
No,
what
I
you're
mean, we're going to order, we'll do it now so we can order
Yeah.
Oh,
it,
okay.
get it delivered.
All right.
And then after that, rather than running 2 practice rounds, Daniel suggested instead that we run some drills. So after the bio break, we'll run 3 drills before lunch. A drill on preparation and Prime Minister speech giving, a drill on back half argument generation, and then a drill on points of information. So So those should be quite short and exciting, and everyone can participate. And then after lunch, we'll run a full practice round. Cool. All right, so 10-minute break. We'll be back in 10:45. He says.